the 1st of February, 2026, exactly 1:47 in the morning. A digital lens watching over a tranquil Tucson neighborhood abruptly cuts to black. This was no random electrical failure or technological glitch. A deliberate, unseen hand severed the feed. At 2:28, a medical cardiac implant permanently ceases communicating with its paired mobile device. The final digital whisper of an elderly mother's beating heart captured by data, stamped in time, and then vanishing forever. When loved ones finally breach her threshold 9 grueling hours later, they discover a chilling stillness. The interior remains pristinely undisturbed. Her cellular device rests abandoned upon the counter. Crucial daily prescriptions sit unopened, while her vehicle waits silently in the garage. The sole absence in this frozen tableau is Nancy Guthrie herself. At 84 years of age, mobility was a daily struggle. Navigating a mere 50 yards required physical support. Whoever orchestrated this vanishing act, she certainly did not walk out into the night willingly. The chilling void spanning those 41 minutes on that early February morning remains the central mystery haunting federal agents. It has sparked the exhaustive review of 10,000 hours of surveillance footage, fueled an astronomical bounty surpassing $1 million, and dominated national broadcasting continually. Yet, establishing the timeline barely scratches the surface. The true heart of this narrative lies in uncovering the dark psychological motive. A veteran behavioral specialist, a man who dedicated 22 years to peering into the minds of predators for the Federal Bureau, has meticulously dissected every frame of captured video and every chilling extortion, demand. His expert eyes recognized a hidden pattern, a psychological fingerprint that the broader public entirely failed to notice. The perpetrator operated under the arrogant delusion of complete anonymity. His ultimate undoing was the false belief that his dark intentions would leave no trace. The intentions left a glaring trail, drawing a damning line right back to his identity. Before delving into the chilling insights brought forth by the behavioral expert, and exploring how the microscopic clues left behind might have already unmasked him, ensure you subscribe and enable notifications. In this deep dive, we refuse to simply skim the surface of sensationalized news. Our focus remains locked on dissecting the physical clues, probing the twisted psychology at play, and chasing down the obscure leads that mainstream platforms ignore. We operate under the conviction that unearthing the methods behind solving a sinister act is equally as vital as detailing the grim mechanics of the crime. Each tragedy demands profound respect and unwavering scrutiny, yielding comprehensive features every single week. For those deeply entrenched in this ongoing mystery, validate your presence by hitting the like button and sharing your theories below. Which key will finally unlock this enigma? The behavioral mapping of a fractured mind, or the cold truths of microscopic science? The reality might shock you. As the layers peel away, it becomes terrifyingly clear that the science and the psychology are inextricably linked. It is time to focus on the victim. We must understand the essence of Nancy Guthrie, the nightmare she endured, and the crucial details her captor drastically miscalculated. The octogenarian never sought the limelight. This distinction is vital, primarily because the public narrative frequently works in reverse, fixating first on celebrity connections, before acknowledging the actual human being at the core. Such a superficial framing does a profound disservice to her legacy. Born in 1941, she dedicated the majority of 6 decades to cultivating a grounded existence rooted in scholarly pursuits, familial bonds, and private spiritual devotion. Stepping away from a long career in the public school system, she was the kind of formative teacher whose impact lingers in the minds of former students today. Her spiritual life was profound, characterized by silent, everyday actions rather than loud declarations. The local pews recognized her weekly presence, and a well-worn scripture permanently rested beside her bed. Telephone check-ins with her offspring were frequent, perhaps occasionally overbearing, governed by the innate protectiveness of motherhood. Together, she brought up 3 individuals, Savannah, Annie, and Cameron. The eldest daughter would eventually rise to national prominence, securing a highly visible hosting role on a premier morning broadcast and becoming a daily staple in living rooms coast to coast. Yet, the matriarch refused to merely exist as a satellite to her child's fame. She anchored her own reality, maintaining a distinct residence, established routines, and a close-knit circle within the scenic Catalina foothills of Tucson. It was here, framed by the stark Arizona desert, that she embraced a peaceful and unassuming twilight. Isolation was never part of the equation. Her daughter Annie, alongside son-in-law Tommaso Cione, resided just a stone's throw away, ensuring consistent and loving supervision. Shared evening meals manifested the enduring presence typical of a deeply connected bloodline. Nevertheless, the inescapable reality of her advanced age remained. Her failing heart relied on a surgical implant, and her continued survival hinged entirely upon an uncompromising regimen of daily prescription drugs. Traversing anything beyond 50 yards demanded physical aid. This was unequivocally not someone capable of spontaneously driving to an airport terminal at 2 in the morning. Venturing out solo beneath the cover of darkness was antithetical to her nature. Leading up to the catastrophic event, the rhythm of her life showed zero signs of disruption. Digital religious gatherings marked her Sunday mornings, punctuated by comforting phone conversations with her high-profile daughter. On the 31st of January, she partook in a standard family supper. The mundane gathering concluded when Tommaso chauffeured her home, dropping her off at 48 minutes past 9, with the heavy bay doors sealing shut at exactly 10 minutes to 10. The grinding halt of that motorized barrier stands as the final verified instance of the elderly woman safe, breathing, and present within the sanctuary of her own walls. The sinister vacuum of time that followed stretching from that late-night drop-off until the horrified realization of her loved ones the following morning is a chronological puzzle that federal authorities have agonizingly attempted to piece together, scrutinizing every ticking second of that empty house. Buried deep within that terrifying expanse of night exists a hyper-specific 41-minute void, a tiny sliver of time that likely conceals the entire horrific truth. To truly comprehend the chilling realities unearthed by the psychological expert, to truly grasp the gravity of this case, one must look at the hard facts, where the physical clues in the dark corridors of the human mind bleed into a single, terrifying narrative. They are merely two sides of the same grim coin. So, let us trace the final known hours. January 31st, 2026. Around 6 o'clock in the evening, Nancy Guthrie sits down for a meal at the residence of her daughter, Annie, and her son-in-law, Tommaso Cione. By all accounts, it was a perfectly ordinary family gathering, utterly unremarkable, devoid of tension, and holding absolutely no hint of the nightmare to come. 9:48 at night. Tommaso drops his mother-in-law back at her quiet estate nestled within the Catalina foothills. It would be the absolute final time any relative laid eyes on her breathing. 9:50 at night. A neighborhood surveillance camera silently records the heavy garage door descending, sealing the homeowner safely inside her sanctuary. She was secured. The streets were still. Yet, from that very minute forward, Nancy completely vanished from all visual records, right up until the sequence of catastrophic events began. January 31st, 2026. In the shadowy window between 10 o'clock at night and the stroke of midnight, a renowned former New York detective made a chilling observation. While combing through the digital footprint secured by local authorities, an investigator spotted an unidentified man drifting across a nearby porch lens. Lurking within the vicinity of the victim's property, the silhouette did not instantly raise red flags. After all, suburban enclaves occasionally see nocturnal strollers traversing the pavement under the streetlights. However, his gait betrayed a sinister intent. This was no casual midnight walk. His body language was predatory, fixated entirely on one particular dwelling, analyzing its vulnerabilities. Rewind exactly 3 weeks prior, to January 11th. Aldine Meister, a woman who had called this community home for 3 decades, observed a strikingly parallel anomaly. A complete stranger was planted rigidly on the sidewalk, occupying a strategic vantage point that offered an unobstructed view straight into the Guthrie estate. A deep sense of unease washed over her. The encounter was burned into her memory simply because it preceded an upcoming weekend celebration for another local resident. With January 8th freshly behind them, the phantom watcher disturbed her so profoundly that she instantly verified the timeline when detectives later swept the block, demanding electronic records from that specific day. For the criminal profilers working the case, this singular piece of context was the smoking gun they had anticipated. This horrific act was entirely devoid of impulse. It was a cold, methodically orchestrated hunt. February 1st, 2026. 1:47 in the morning. The digital eye guarding the victim's front porch suddenly dies. It was not a glitch in the software. A heavily concealed intruder crept up to the entryway and physically blinded the system with a heavy botanical arrangement. Yet, this calculated attempt at invisibility was silently captured by a secondary, hidden lens the stalker completely missed. Law enforcement eventually salvaged that crucial hidden clip. The very act of neutralizing the security array spoke volumes, pointing toward extensive reconnaissance and an intimate understanding of the grounds. The perpetrator knew exactly what technology was present and its precise blind spots. At 1:47 in the morning, a deadly countdown commenced. 2:12 in the morning, an auxiliary sensor device situated on the perimeter senses a disturbance. The hardware was not configured to capture visual imagery. Lacking a paid digital storage plan, the device could only log the barest digital whisper, confirming an entity had breached its invisible boundary. The system silently documented the precise second, 2:28 in the morning. The victim's implanted heart monitor severs its wireless connection to her mobile device. That smartphone would ultimately be discovered resting, abandoned upon the Marble Island, undisturbed. Maintaining that vital medical link demanded the two devices remain tightly bound by close-range wireless frequencies. By 2:28 in the pre-dawn darkness, the elderly woman and her lifeline had been forcefully separated. It would serve as the absolute final technological pulse her living body would ever transmit. The terrifying gap spanning from the first disabled camera to the dropped heart signal lasted exactly 41 minutes. 41 excruciating minutes where a faceless predator roamed freely through her private sanctuary. A period of time where an intruder inhaled the very atmosphere of her most sacred spaces. We must continually circle back to that specific time frame, because from an investigative standpoint, those precious moments hold the entirety of the dark truth. 2:36 in the morning. A localized doorbell sensor, affixed to a dwelling along Camino Royale, roughly 2.5 miles away, spots a solitary automobile gliding down the desolate road. The synchronicity of this passing car is profoundly alarming. A prominent national reporter verified that the asphalt journey separating the crime scene from that specific electronic witness takes a precise 6 minutes to navigate. The heart monitor fell utterly silent at 2:28. Factor in that brief commute, placing the expected arrival at 2:34. The neighborhood lens recorded the headlights mere seconds later, at 2:36. A microscopic, 2-minute margin of error. Just enough time for a killer to slip out the door, load their cargo, and vanish, aligning flawlessly with the authorities' mathematical puzzle. The leading county sheriff publicly acknowledged that detectives have secured this very clip, keeping it at the absolute forefront of their ongoing pursuit for justice. February 1st, 2026. Roughly 11 o'clock in the morning. The victim's daughter, alongside anxious relatives, descended upon the quiet property when their matriarch uncharacteristically vanished from her weekly online congregation, an event she was fiercely devoted to. They were met with chilling discoveries: a forgotten cell phone on the granite, essential life-saving pills sitting sealed in their bottles, and her vehicle parked silently in the bay. Every single corner of the residence remained eerily pristine and perfectly ordered, save for the devastating absence of its owner. And then, the terrifying crimson stains were found pooling on the threshold. Forensic laboratories would inevitably prove that the biological fluid belonged exclusively to the missing woman. The stark geometry of the spatter, perfectly rounded drops, indicating she stood completely still, whispered a grim tale to crime scene technicians. She bled out right on those steps, immobilized and unable to flee. The discovery of microscopic, aerosolized crimson spray woven into the macabre artwork proved a horrifying reality. Her lungs were still expanding. She was wide awake when the violence commenced. Her pulse was still drumming through her veins. She was stolen into the pitch-black void from the perceived safety of her own entryway, stripped away without her lifeline, her prescriptions, her auditory devices, or her smartwatch. Somewhere hidden within those shadows, an obscured figure committed fatal errors, missteps that could never be erased. For 22 years, Jim Clemente operated deep inside the Federal Bureau of Investigation. His days were consumed by hunting child abductors and unraveling the minds of serial killers, serving as a cornerstone of the elite behavioral analysis unit. Leaving the agency behind, he translated his grim expertise to the screen, creating the hit drama Criminal Minds, a television phenomenon rooted firmly in the very psychological warfare he utilized on the job. When Clemente examined the security tapes and the extortion letters tied to the abduction of Nancy Guthrie, he sensed an immediate anomaly. He zeroed in on a chilling detail that nearly every other observer had completely overlooked. These letters were never truly about the money. In a standard abduction driven by financial gain, the dialogue follows a very rigid, highly anticipated blueprint. The demands are short, they are blunt. Every single word revolves strictly around the mechanics of getting paid. A traditional hostage taker desires cash, demands it fast, and craves absolute anonymity, going out of their way to dodge the press. They promise devastating retaliation if law enforcement is contacted, delivering a warning that rarely deviates from case to case. Deliver the funds, keep your mouth shut, or the victim perishes. Yet, the messages that emerged in this particular nightmare were constructed on a completely alien foundation. Within the initial 14 days following her vanishing, no fewer than 2 distinct extortion missives surfaced. Neither was mailed to the grieving family. Instead, they were deliberately routed to the press, one landing at TMZ, the other arriving at regional broadcast networks in Arizona. The letters did ask for a payout. The price tag was set at exactly $6 million. It was a chillingly calculated sum, far from a random guess made in a frantic moment. It was a digit born of careful, meticulous study. When you break down the rumored multi-year compensation Savannah Guthrie receives from NBC, it averages out to that precise neighborhood. Detectives certainly flagged the monetary demand, yet for an expert like Clemente, the cash meant nothing. It was the vocabulary that sounded the alarm. Hidden within the demands were intricate critiques regarding the active police hunt. The author cited exact details about the frail health of the victim, mentioning a pacemaker and essential heart medications, proving this was the work of someone who had done their homework, rather than a mere opportunist. The texts addressed the high-profile daughter by name and actively played into the dramatic narrative spinning on the nightly news. One specific document featured a sentence that instantly caught the eye of the profiler. "You assume you understand this crime, but you are blind though soon, your eyes will be opened." Words like that are not meant to broker a deal. They are meant to set a psychological stage. This was the voice of a puppeteer desperate to manipulate the narrative, rather than a ghost hoping to grab a duffel bag of cash and vanish, as Clemente bluntly explained during a deep dive on an investigative broadcast. An offender driven purely by greed will shrink into the background, limiting their interactions to the absolute bare minimum. They snatch the payday and disappear forever. However, when the underlying fuel is a mental fixation, the perpetrator hungers for the spotlight. Desperate to weave their own existence into the fabric of a famous figure, they crave total dominance over a massively public spectacle. They flip the traditional script, actively courting reporters to ensure a global audience is holding its breath. They demand a starring role in the tragedy. This difference is far more than just arguing over semantics. It separates 2 vastly unique breeds of predators, demanding 2 completely conflicting strategies from law enforcement. Brad Garrett, another veteran of the Bureau who spent years assessing severe threats and later dissected this mystery for national television, distilled the reality perfectly. Hunting down the flesh and blood of a superstar, particularly a mother or father, is an act designed to deliver a profound declaration. It screams, "I have the power to breach your walls. I can shatter your reality, and you are finally forced to look at me." The money is a smokescreen. The true goal is creating an inescapable bond. To grasp the sheer danger of this motive, one must look at the dark mechanics of a mind that becomes pathologically obsessed with a complete stranger. For countless years, the profiling division at the Bureau has meticulously dissected offenses birthed from this toxic infatuation with the famous. The data they have compiled reveals a chilling truth that defies common logic. These culprits are rarely the unhinged, yelling stalkers depicted in movies. Instead, they are usually silent, lonely individuals who seamlessly blend into their surroundings. From the outside looking in, they punch the clock, stick to a quiet schedule, and strike the people next door as deeply ordinary. Beneath that mundane exterior, however, a psychological storm is brewing. Slowly, day by day, the stalker builds a sprawling, imaginary universe where they share a profound connection with the star, a delusion that feels entirely authentic to them. To the perpetrator, this phantom romance possesses a deep past, undeniable meaning, and a shared passion. To sustain it, they ruthlessly monitor every aspect of the target. They scour online profiles, memorizing the identities of loved ones, mapping out home addresses, tracking daily habits, and hunting for weak points. Hours are spent analyzing televised conversations, tracing travel routes, and archiving every single time the star steps in front of a camera. A dangerous belief takes root. If they can simply bridge the physical gap, they can compel their idol to finally notice them. They are certain that once the star is confronted, an undeniable spark will ignite, leading to mutual devotion. But then, reality shatters the illusion. When impassioned letters vanish into the void, and digital pleas are met with nothing but dead silence, the fatal shift begins. Being rejected at the studio gates does not shatter their twisted fantasy. Instead, it pours gasoline on a smoldering fire, mutating the obsession into something far more dangerous. The historical record paints a chilling picture of this exact trajectory. Consider the dark morning of July 18, 1989. Young Hollywood starlet Rebecca Schaeffer found herself the target of a deeply disturbed fan. After 3 years of relentless letter writing and repeated ejections from her production lot, his patience finally snapped. Utilizing a private detective to bypass her privacy, he located her private residence. The moment she opened her front door, a single, fatal bullet struck her chest, ending her life right there on the welcome mat. That senseless execution became the catalyst for the absolute first laws in the United States, explicitly criminalizing the act of stalking. Fast forward to March 31st, 1995. The woman running Selena Quintanilla's fan empire, a deeply entrenched confidant, fired a bullet into the singer's back during a heated dispute over stolen funds. During the subsequent interrogations, the shooter insisted that murdering the beloved icon was never her actual goal. Her twisted master plan was supposedly to end her own life, while the star watched helplessly, creating a traumatic, inescapable bond of shared agony. It was a desperate bid to make the singer truly comprehend the sheer magnitude of her devotion. Then, look at the freezing night of December 8, 1980. A man named Mark David Chapman lingered in the shadows near the Dakota Building in Manhattan, anticipating the arrival of John Lennon. In his confessions, he articulated a terrifying motive. He pulled the trigger simply to steal a piece of fame, permanently grafting his own insignificant identity onto a legend who would live forever. 3 distinct tragedies spanning 30 years, orchestrated by 3 entirely unrelated individuals. Yet, beneath the surface, the exact same psychological motor was running. It is the overwhelming hunger to become significant to a person completely oblivious to their existence. Once polite avenues of contact are blocked, that craving does not just fade away. It ferments, growing increasingly toxic until it carves out a violent route toward mandatory recognition, a statement that simply cannot be brushed aside. Retired federal behavioral analyst Mary Ellen O'Toole, reviewing the chilling circumstances of the Nancy Guthrie abduction, categorizes this exact phenomenon as a highly focused, mission-driven compulsion. Financial enrichment is entirely irrelevant here. The abduction serves solely to pacify a deeply entrenched mental obsession that has been quietly festering in the dark for an extended period. Furthermore, renowned profiler Jim Clemente emphasizes a terrifying reality regarding this specific nightmare. The target of this obsession was never truly Nancy. The ultimate prize has always been her daughter, Savannah. The matriarch herself holds no vast fortune. She lives quietly, far removed from the glaring spotlight of celebrity life. Without deep pockets or liquid riches, she completely fails to meet the criteria of a victim selected by an extortionist looking for a massive payday. However, her child happens to be a cornerstone of American morning television, commanding one of the largest daily broadcasting audiences in the nation. She is a cultural fixture, beaming into millions of living rooms from coast to coast with the rising of every sun. Snatching the mother is the ultimate leverage to force an intimate dynamic with the daughter. For a predator wired this way, viewing a desperate, weeping plea on a screen or reading a heartbroken social media update is not viewed as inflicting pain. It acts as profound psychological nourishment. It delivers the undeniable, captive attention they failed to secure through conventional stalking. The broadcast on the morning of February 7th, 2026, featured the anchor and her family looking straight into the lens, begging the abductor for mercy. Fighting back visible anguish, her message was simple and devastating. She pleaded that whoever was holding her mother recognized the woman's inherently sweet and harmless nature. Emphasizing her mother's absolute innocence, she begged the shadow in the dark to just release her and let their family be whole again. That heart-wrenching soundbite echoed across every massive media network. For a prolonged period, the anchor's entire existence in the public eye became tethered exclusively to a faceless captor. To a disturbed mind, completely obsessed with this television star, witnessing that agony is not a horrifying ordeal. It is an absolute, intoxicating triumph. O'Toole elaborates further on the pathology. Individuals fitting this behavioral mold are perpetually haunted by a crushing sense of their own insignificance and impotence in the real world. They operate under the illusion that they are ghosts among the living. Executing such a high-stakes crime manufactures an environment where society is completely forced to look at them. Suddenly, and perhaps for the very first moment in their pathetic lives, they hold ultimate power. Fortunately for investigators, this type of manic compulsion always leaves behind a breadcrumb trail. Peeling back the layers, Clemente's assessment points heavily toward a middle-aged Caucasian man, somewhere in his third or fourth decade of life, harboring firmly established ties to the Tucson region. This is not a sudden whim. This phantom has been meticulously tracking the broadcaster's ascent for a very long time. His progressively erratic devotion undoubtedly triggered alarms in the past, generating a paper trail buried within corporate threat logs, network security intercepts, or quiet disturbances at live broadcasting events. As ex-federal investigator Jennifer Coffin-Daffer points out, the parameters of this specific suspect pool are remarkably narrow. We are not talking about an ocean of suspects. The list of viable candidates hovers around a few dozen names at most, and federal authorities are currently dissecting the lives of every last one of them. Yet, while behavioral science casts an incredibly effective net, it cannot magically produce a singular identity on its own. The final breakthrough relies entirely on the ghost's physical mistakes. Despite his meticulous planning, the intruder took immense precautions. He shielded his features entirely, wrapped his hands in synthetic barriers, and almost certainly swapped them out periodically to prevent cross-contamination. To thwart trace evidence recovery, he operated inside a complete protective garment, sealing his own clothing away. He even went as far as blinding the front porch lens using a simple garden planter. By systematically neutralizing the main security feeds prior to breaching the threshold, he proved his deep understanding of crime scene investigation. He genuinely believed this extensive knowledge rendered him completely undetectable. But his arrogance blinded him to a fundamental biological reality, a lethal oversight that no amount of sterile gear could possibly conceal. For nearly 3/4 of an hour, 41 agonizing minutes, his lungs functioned inside that house. The general public remains largely oblivious to the terrifying capabilities of modern forensic science in the year 2026. Investigators no longer require pools of plasma or smudged ridges on a glass pane. A criminal does not even have to lay a physical finger on a single surface to be caught. Merely occupying a room is enough to seal your fate. With every single breath drawn and released, an invisible cloud of microscopic biological material is blasted into the surrounding air. It is a silent storm of respiratory fluid, mucosal fragments, and shedding cells originating deep within the throat, sinus cavities, and pulmonary tissue. The naked eye sees nothing but empty space, yet the air itself holds the absolute genetic blueprint of a monster. The microscopic fragments drift downward, coating everyday surfaces. They weave themselves into the threading of carpets, blanket kitchen counters, and wedge deep within the narrow crevices of hardwood floors. When a trespasser lingers inside an enclosed suburban home for 41 agonizing minutes, that invisible debris builds up exponentially. Physical exertion, navigating unfamiliar hallways, hauling dead weight, and operating under intense psychological strain forces the lungs to work harder, accelerating the respiratory rate. With every heavy exhale, a greater cloud of biological evidence is left behind, and the moment a word is spoken, that expulsion of microscopic genetic data multiplies rapidly. The abductor occupied the quiet sanctuary of Nancy Guthrie's residence from roughly 1:47 in the morning until 2:28. That is 41 uninterrupted minutes of heavy exhales, 41 minutes of deliberate, calculated motion. For nearly 3/4 of an hour, his biological signature cascaded onto the furniture of every single room he violated, and federal agents have since meticulously combed through that property as a major crime scene. Sheriff Chris Nanos has publicly verified that biological evidence was successfully extracted from the residence. Crucially, this genetic code bears zero relation to Nancy Guthrie or her closest relatives. Authorities categorize the finding as a complex mixture, a tangled web of cellular material belonging to several different people. While overlapping biological signatures present a steep analytical hurdle, they are far from a dead end. Investigators have dispatched this crucial swab to an independent forensic facility in Florida for a process known as deconvolution. This highly advanced algorithmic procedure meticulously untangles the intertwined strands of distinct human codes. In a parallel development, investigators stumbled upon a pair of discarded gloves resting roughly 2 miles away from the abduction site. Forensic technicians extracted trace biological remnants from the fabric, successfully building a viable genetic profile that was immediately run through the National Criminal Database. Yet, despite querying the Federal Bureau of Investigation's massive repository of more than 26 million previous offenders and detainees, the system returned a chilling result: 0 matches. However, a negative database return does not spell the end of the hunt. It simply alters the battlefield. Federal agents pivot to a far more modern weapon: forensic investigative genetic genealogy. This is the exact scientific breakthrough that ultimately unmasked Joseph James DeAngelo, the notorious Golden State Killer, ending a terrifying 40-year mystery. It is the very same cutting-edge strategy that cornered Bryan Kohberger mere weeks following the brutal Idaho college slayings in 2022. This revolutionary tactic bypasses the need for the perpetrator to have a pre-existing rap sheet. The Phantom's code does not need to linger in any state-run registry. Investigators merely need a single biological link, a distant family member who unknowingly mailed off a saliva swab to a commercial genealogy website. Corporations such as 23andMe and Ancestry DNA boast sprawling archives containing the biological blueprints of tens of millions of everyday citizens. These are ordinary individuals who simply swabbed their cheeks out of innocent curiosity about their lineage. They wanted to track down long-lost cousins or map out the geographic origins of their ancestors. Little do they realize that their casual participation forged a permanent biological ledger, one that, given the right legal loopholes, can be directly compared against crime scene remnants. Barbara Ray Venter, the pioneering forensic genealogist responsible for constructing the sprawling familial web that trapped the Golden State Killer, previously broke down this exact mechanism in startlingly simple terms. Investigators extract the anonymous biological signature found at the scene and feed it directly into massive commercial heritage networks. The algorithm identifies fragmented connections, not the actual perpetrator, but rather blood relations possessing overlapping sequences of cellular data. Using those scattered biological breadcrumbs, detectives begin constructing a vast, interconnected ancestral chart. They work backward through the decades, meticulously pruning away any one of the incorrect gender, age bracket, or geographic radius, tightening the net until only a handful of viable targets remain. Finally, law enforcement surreptitiously collects a fresh biological specimen to verify the match, a painstaking method that successfully captured a phantom who vanished into the shadows for 4 decades. Sheriff Nanos publicly acknowledged that the mysterious biological remnants harvested from the Guthrie residence are currently undergoing this exact genealogical tracing. The primary hurdle, as the sheriff emphasized, lies in the degraded nature of the collected evidence. Untangling multiple overlapping identities demands intensive algorithmic patience, but the digital dragnet is actively sweeping through the servers of a commercial heritage platform as we speak. The ancestral roadmap leading to this intruder is already out there. It might belong to a distant cousin or an oblivious aunt who mailed in a vial of spit 3 years ago just to see if she possessed Irish roots. None of these innocent relatives possess the slightest clue that their idle curiosity might become the crucial key that exposes a monster. A living creature cannot simply pause their respiration. That involuntary bodily function might have already handed detectives his family name, though biology is merely a single piece of the puzzle. During the precise time frame that the independent Florida lab commenced untangling the biological mystery, another investigative avenue was opening up. An entirely separate division within the Federal Bureau of Investigation was quietly dissecting a completely different breed of digital footprint. The Cellular Analysis Survey Team, a highly classified branch known as CAST, specializes in mapping out human trajectories by scrutinizing mobile network handshakes and smartphone telemetry. This elite technological task force played a pivotal role in pinpointing Bryan Kohberger's whereabouts during the chilling aftermath of the 2022 Idaho University massacre. Even resting silently in a pocket, a mobile device is constantly broadcasting invisible signals, desperately shaking hands with local antennas to sustain a connection. Telecommunication conglomerates meticulously log, date, and archive every single one of those electronic whispers. Armed with a subpoena, federal agents can harvest a comprehensive map of every single phone operating within a specific perimeter during the crime's timeframe. Heather Barnhart, a seasoned cyber investigation specialist who previously consulted on the Kohberger case, has turned her analytical eye toward the Guthrie abduction. She articulated a fundamental truth of data hunting. One must fully comprehend mundane routine before the anomalies emerge from the noise. Each suburban enclave generates its own rhythmic digital heartbeat. Once analysts chart that mundane hum, the electronic intruders stand out like glaring beacons in the dark. To cut through the static, the specialized tracking unit is hunting for 4 very distinct, highly incriminating electronic signatures. Long before the dark morning of February 1st, the invisible digital footprint of surveillance was already being laid. Cellular reconnaissance repeatedly registered devices lurking within the quiet shadows of Nancy's neighborhood. In forensic profiling, a sudden digital blackout, the precise window when a device is deliberately powered down during a crime, speaks volumes of cold calculation and malicious intent. Much like the infamous Kohberger investigation, this orchestrated silence transforms into undeniable proof of a guilty conscience. The critical vulnerability, however, lies in the exit ping, that fatal microsecond when a predator powers their device back on, blindly grabbing for a signal from the nearest cellular tower. It is a digital flare fired into the night, instantly betraying both their exact trajectory of escape and any close-range encounters along the way. Operating quietly in the background, passive network recognition possesses the terrifying capability to pinpoint a handset mere paces from Nancy's front door. Speaking to Fox News at 2:28 a.m., former FBI agent Jason Tack painted a daunting picture of the investigation, noting they are sitting on absolute mountains of raw data. Out of this digital abyss, identities have slowly materialized, scrutinized under a microscopic lens. While several individuals have been definitively cleared, a lingering few remain deeply entangled in the active suspect pool. This abductor operated under the fatal delusion that a powered-down smartphone equated to true invisibility in the modern age, fundamentally failing to realize that the deliberate absence of data is, in itself, the most damning evidence. The very second he reignited his screen, he broadcast his precise coordinates to the world, allowing the cellular analysis survey team to track those electronic whispers until they coalesce into a definitive identity. By February 26, 2026, a high-ranking FBI official verified a staggering reality. Detectives had quietly stockpiled an overwhelming 10,000 hours of surveillance footage tied to the abduction. To comprehend the sheer scale of this visual archive, a human being watching at normal playback speed would require over 416 uninterrupted days just to view it from start to finish. Yet, law enforcement is not relying on the frailties of the human eye to parse this ocean of imagery. Instead, they have unleashed BriefCam, an advanced artificial intelligence video analytics engine that permits detectives to feed highly specific target parameters into the system, churning through every single frame of available tape in mere minutes rather than agonizing months. Former homicide investigator Chris McDonough starkly outlined the grim efficiency of this modern investigative warfare. We are long past the era of exhausted patrolmen nursing bad coffee while staring blankly at blurry security monitors for days on end. The reality now is cold, calculating algorithms digesting terabytes of visual information, surgically isolating specific vehicle makes, mapping suspects across interconnected surveillance grids, and effortlessly constructing airtight chronological timelines. The absolute epicenter of this algorithmic dragnet is a mysterious vehicle, briefly immortalized by a Camino Royale ring camera at 2:36 a.m., hovering ominously just 2.5 miles away from Nancy's residence. Chillingly, this sighting occurred precisely 6 minutes after the victim's pacemaker ceased its transmissions. Studying the ghostly frame, retired NYPD Detective Pat Brosnan confidently classified the shadowy shape as sharing the distinct profile of a Kia Soul. Acknowledging the gravity of this lead, Sheriff Nanos has publicly verified that this pivotal visual artifact remains a central, beating heart of their ongoing manhunt. Deep within encrypted servers, the BriefCam software is relentlessly hunting that specific automobile, cross-referencing its unique geometry against the entirety of the 10,000-hour digital vault. Authorities are meticulously reconstructing a phantom map, detailing exactly where this car prowled in the days preceding February 1st, tracing its clandestine escape route from the crime scene, and tracking its final, desperate destination. Within an ever-expanding, citywide web of optical sensors, hundreds of thousands of irrelevant civilian cars are being ruthlessly analyzed and discarded to find the one that matters. Then, there emerges the microscopic flaw, the predator never meant to leave behind, despite arriving under the guise of flawless preparation. He shielded his identity beneath a seamless full-body containment suit, layered his hands in multiple pairs of thick gloves, and concealed his features behind a mask stretching tightly from his brow down to his mouth. Displaying a terrifying degree of premeditation, he had anticipated the primary doorbell camera and devised a strategy to blind it. His fatal oversight was the hidden secondary lens, silently watching his every move from the shadows. The haunting Nest doorbell capture reveals the heavily masked phantom methodically advancing upon Nancy's front entryway in the dead of night. In a sudden jolt of realization, upon spotting the digital eye, he instinctively plunges his hand into the nearby landscaping, ripping out a handful of brush in a desperate bid to physically smother the recording device. But in the frantic execution of that singular, violent motion, the outward rotation of his forearm exposed the vulnerable underside of his right wrist to the unblinking lens. Profiler Jim Clemente, scrutinizing the tape frame by agonizing frame, pinpointed a distinct, shadowy marking that heavily suggests the presence of a tattoo. As Clemente chillingly observed, the intruder operated under the absolute certainty that he was blinding the system. In reality, he was cementing his own doom. He unwittingly gifted the authorities an indelible, anatomical barcode inked directly into his flesh, empowering the FBI to synthesize a highly accurate physical profile of the phantom. The resulting silhouette describes a male standing roughly 5 feet 9 inches to 5 feet 10 inches tall, possessing a tragically unremarkable medium build, dark facial stubble, and harboring a highly conspicuous insignia upon his right wrist. Ink woven into the dermis does not lie, nor does it wash away. It is a permanent brand that no amount of layered latex gloves can retroactively erase from existence. The moment the task force hones in on a definitive identity, be it via complex genetic genealogy, cellular triangulation, or algorithmic vehicle tracking, the very first physical verification they seek will be the damning secret hidden on that forearm. It is crucial to understand that these are not isolated silos of inquiry. Rather, they are distinct investigative lifelines spun from different forensic disciplines, handled by specialized squads, yet all inexorably tightening around one solitary target. Former FBI operative Jennifer Kidnapper eloquently articulated the psychological gravity of this methodological strangulation. To conquer a mystery, you do not require a flawless, unbroken chain of evidence. You merely need an intersecting web of fragments so precise that, when finally locked together, the resulting cage holds only a single occupant. When 5 entirely independent avenues of forensic science point their bloody compasses at the same suspect, they cease to be mere coincidences. They fuse into an inescapable reality. Picture the horrifying beauty of this convergence. The Cellular Analysis Survey team flags a phone dropping off the grid at exactly 1:47 a.m. on February 1st, only to violently reawaken 15 miles south of Nancy's residence at 3:47 a.m. Meanwhile, an invisible biological fingerprint left inside the violated home allows genetic genealogists to reverse engineer an entire ancestral lineage from nothing but discarded DNA. This biological breadcrumb trail brutally narrows the hunt down to a singular family name, zeroing in on a male suspect in his 30s or 40s with deep-rooted ties to the greater Tucson landscape. In a devastating stroke of investigative synergy, that very surname perfectly mirrors the subscriber records of the cellular device flagged by the cyber analysts. Simultaneously, the BriefCam artificial intelligence spots a vehicle registered to this exact individual fleeing the kill zone at precisely 2:36 a.m., prompting behavioral profilers to unearth a deeply disturbing psychological dossier. Lurking within those files lies a long, documented history of obsessive fixation, punctuated by unnerving attempts to force contact with public figures like Nancy Guthrie over the span of several years. The final, deafening strike of the gavel falls when detectives summon his Department of Motor Vehicles portrait, revealing the unmistakable ink staining his right wrist. These fragments are no longer circumstantial anomalies. It is one inescapable verdict. A moment former FBI agent Jason Pack described to Fox News as the terrifying crescendo where all evidence reaches its ultimate, undeniable convergence point. In the shadows of a complex investigation, when every fractured piece of evidence converges upon a single identity, hesitation evaporates. You strike. On the 2nd of March, 2026, Pima County Sheriff Chris Nanos stepped in front of the cameras, cutting through the lingering uncertainty to declare that law enforcement was, in his exact phrasing, undeniably edging closer to unraveling this dark puzzle. Radiating an unwavering certainty that the perpetrators would be unmasked, he dropped a secondary revelation that sent shockwaves through the community. It was a profound declaration, the kind of assertion that bears immense psychological gravity when uttered by a seasoned official 30-plus days into one of the most intensely monitored abductions in modern American lore. His chilling yet hopeful proclamation was simple. I am personally convinced that Nancy Guthrie is still breathing. This was no mere media spin designed to placate the public. This was the voice of a commander privy to the darkest, most closely guarded secrets the Federal Bureau was meticulously dissecting. He sees the entire chessboard, every microscopic forensic fiber, every encrypted digital footprint, and every covert lead generated by the elite strike force. By making such a claim, he effectively wagered his entire professional legacy on a conviction rooted squarely in the cold, hard data. As veteran federal operative Jason Pack astutely observed, an authority figure only broadcasts such a monumental claim when the forensic reality leaves them no other choice. Buried deep within the cellular ping logs, the biological traces, or the clandestine intelligence chatter, a hidden truth whispers that this elderly captive can still be rescued. In this ruthless business, investigators simply do not offer that kind of profound hope without a concrete, undeniable foundation. That same Monday, the sprawling crime scene was finally declassified, allowing Savannah Guthrie and her loved ones to step back into the residence after forensic units completed their exhaustive sweep. Crossing that threshold for the first time since the dawn of February, Savannah drifted like a ghost through the silent rooms, her fingers brushing the fabric of the sofa where her mother once spent peaceful afternoons immersed in literature. Hanging on the wall, a paper calendar remained stubbornly pinned to January, a haunting, frozen monument to the exact second their reality was violently fractured. As daylight faded, she gently laid a bouquet of bright yellow blooms atop the expanding vigil, taking shape on the front lawn. Taking to social media, she shared a poignant image accompanied by a desperate plea, expressing profound gratitude for the wave of prayers washing over them from local Tucson neighborhoods to the furthest corners of the nation. Her message was a raw, bleeding request. Keep holding on to hope, keep praying, and help us drag her out of the dark. They were not begging for an autopsy report or a courtroom victory. They demanded her safe return, an active, breathing, present-tense command from a bloodline that utterly refuses to speak of their matriarch in the past tense. Echoing that fierce resilience, the county's top lawman, armed with the full weight of a classified intelligence dossier, boldly went on the record to validate that exact same sentiment. At 84 years of age, Nancy Guthrie was violently snatched from her own entryway in the pitch-black hours before sunrise on the 1st of February, 2026. She was not a shadowy target. She was a former school teacher, the anchor to 3 children, and a deeply beloved grandmother. A devout soul who never skipped a Sabbath gathering, she had brewed her morning coffee in that exact same culinary space for over a generation. Her stolen future endless chats with her girls, tender embraces with her grandchildren, and tranquil twilight hours spent lost in a book was abruptly erased. That comforting dent she left in the cushions now serves as a hollow reminder of the thief in the night, a predator desperately craving psychological significance. This was the work of a phantom who nurtured a sick fixation over a span of months, perhaps even years, mapping out the family's blind spots and executing calculated reconnaissance missions under the cold January skies. He masked the security lenses, wrapped his hands in fabric, and contaminated the airspace of that house for 41 agonizing minutes, operating under the delusion that his meticulous choreography made him a ghost. He was fatally mistaken. Every microscopic exhale he unleashed left behind a genetic signature, a biological blueprint, currently being torn apart by forensic specialists in a high-tech Florida facility. Every single digital handshake his device made with local towers before going dark is permanently burned into telecom archives, data that the cellular analysis strike team is relentlessly dissecting as we speak. Across 10,000 hours of captured video, every fleeting shadow he cast is currently being hunted down by unblinking, tireless tracking software that refuses to rest. His ultimate game was psychological dominance. He craved the horrified gaze and undivided attention of a high-profile figure. He desired to be a headline, and he succeeded. Yet, that twisted notoriety offers zero armor against the avalanche of microscopic blunders he abandoned at the scene. 41 uninterrupted minutes of respiration, the careless flick of a wrist exposing skin to a lens he foolishly believed he had blinded. A mobile signal flaring back to life a mere 15 miles south of the city limits at 3:47 in the dead of night. The scattered clues are no longer just a working hypothesis, they are locking onto a singular human identity. Out there in the viewing audience, a silent observer holds the missing puzzle piece. Perhaps you reside in the quiet cul-de-sacs bordering the victim's estate. Or perhaps the suspect's profile triggers a dark memory. A male standing between 5 feet 9 inches and 5 feet 10 inches, possessing an average physique, sporting dark facial scruff, and bearing a potential ink mark on his right wrist. It could be a fleeting glimpse of that getaway vehicle, or an acquaintance whose entire demeanor shifted unnervingly as February dawned. Maybe you are uncomfortably aware of an individual who has spent years vocalizing an infatuation with the broadcaster, a fixation that always teetered on the edge of deeply unsettling. Should you possess even a fragment of insight regarding this harrowing abduction, you are urged to dial the federal authorities instantly at 1-800-CALL-FBI. Covert intelligence can be routed directly through tips.fbi.gov. Alternatively, the local sheriff's command center awaits your dispatch at 520-351-4900 or via their untraceable hotline at 520-882-7463. To sweeten the scales of justice, the family has placed a staggering bounty of $1 million on the table. Federal agents have stacked an extra $100,000 on top of that pile. Claiming this massive fortune does not hinge upon slapping cuffs on a suspect. It demands absolutely zero courtroom convictions. The sole requirement is delivering the exact coordinates that bring a kidnapped elder back alive, and the payout can be secured entirely from the shadows. As the clock ticks past the 40-day mark, the rallying cry of this shattered lineage remains unchanged. Pull her out of the abyss. Alive and breathing, they remain paralyzed in a state of suspended agony, desperately staring at a silent telephone. This matriarch earned the right to see her own living room again, and her bloodline is owed the unvarnished truth. Because the reality of what happened in that dark house must be dragged into the light. If the gravity of this hunt resonates within your core, if you stand by the belief that such malicious crimes require relentless, uncompromising scrutiny, we remain anchored to the cold, hard facts until genuine justice is ultimately secured. To stay informed as we navigate these shadows, please subscribe and turn on your notifications. Our pursuit of this mystery will push forward into whatever dark corners it may hide, and we urge you to share your own psychological deductions in the comments below. Will it be the fragmented psychology of a predator, or the microscopic whispers of forensic science that ultimately crack this enigma wide open? Tell us which chilling detail lingers in your mind. We must always remember that this is far more than a simple narrative. Nancy Guthrie was a living, breathing woman, and the agonizing void left within her family is a devastating reality. And somewhere out there, hidden within the sprawling landscape of Tucson, Arizona, or lingering just outside its limits, exists a person whose very missteps are currently being decoded from digital footprints by relentless detectives. The hunt for undeniable answers remains active, and it simply will not be abandoned. Every aspect of this deep dive was constructed with the utmost reverence for Nancy and those mourning her absence. Our singular mission is to dissect the clues and unearth the reality, vehemently refusing to exploit profound suffering for mere entertainment. It is our core belief that such dark and complex matters demand an intensely rigorous, solemn, and highly dignified method of examination. We extend our gratitude to you for absorbing these grim details with the mature solemnity they require. If you, or a person close to you, are currently experiencing a severe crisis, please contact first responders immediately. At this stage in the timeline, law enforcement has yet to officially indict anyone regarding the unsettling vanishing of Nancy. Every name brought to light during this presentation holds an absolute presumption of innocence, a fundamental right that remains unbroken until definitively proven otherwise before a judge and jury. The hypotheses and behavioral breakdowns presented herein are carefully synthesized from the perspectives of vetted specialists available in the public domain, and they must be viewed exclusively through that speculative lens.